So today we're going to be talking about nursery care, and we're going to talk about four main things. Number one would be feed, number two would be water, number three would be environment, and number four would be individual animal care. So feed is critically important when we're taking in weaned pigs. You know, the biggest reason why it's so critical is because they're going straight from mother's milk and we're transitioning them onto a solid feed. So making sure that we have really high quality feed that is formulated exactly for their requirements is really important. High quality pellets without fines is a really important part of that. Pellets are highly digestible and they work very well with the pig's digestive system. Feeder adjustment is pretty important also as we're looking at starting pigs. We want to make sure that our feeders are adjusted fairly open. We want to make it very easy for these pigs to find the feeder. We want it very easy for them to eat as much feed as they possibly can. Again, the most important thing to starting pigs right is to making sure that they have high intake as soon as possible. Feed intake is a really important part of getting pigs off to a profitable and healthy start. So one of the tools that we can use is mat feeding. And when we do mat feeding, we want to do that for the first week once they're placed into the barn. It's really simple, and the more times a day you do it, the better off you are. So all you really need to do is just take a handful of feed, place it on the mat, and naturally the pigs will go after that feed, and that will induce higher intake of these pigs. And the higher the intake, the better off they're going to do. So again, as we're talking about improving feed intake and making sure that we've got enough feed going into these pigs as much as possible, another tool other than mat feeding and making sure that our feeders are well adjusted and open is actually gruel feeding. You know, this is really critical, especially for pigs that don't start well or have to be restarted or are in a hospital pen. The process is very simple, and you know, the more that we can do gruel feeding, the better off these pigs are going to do starting out. So it's a very simple process. There's different types of gruel feeders. This is just a PVC trough cut in half, and this is just a bowl that we can mix it in. So Kickoff is our gruel product. It's specially formulated with a high amount of milk and oats for high intake and high gut health. It's also in a meal form, so it mixes great in a gruel mash. Comes in a 25-pound bag, and it's very easy to handle. Pigs love it. So gruel feeding is simple and easy. All we need to do is mix 1 part feed to 2 parts water. As you can see, I put a cup of Kickoff in the gruel feeder, and now all I'm going to do is pour water. And that's about the consistency that we want. The feed will soak up some of the water, and gruel feeding accomplishes 2 main things. One is it's going to increase the pig's water intake, and the other one is going to increase their feed intake. So water and feed, we're accomplishing both at the same time with gruel. So this is a PVC pipe cut in half. This is a homemade feeder. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. All we need to do is have an easy place for pigs to access feed and for it to hold water. So here I'm just going to go ahead and pour some in there again. You know, again, it doesn't have to be fancy. We just need to get the job accomplished of mixing feed and water at the right consistency. Pigs will go after it, and they will do very well. Making sure that the water is properly managed in a nursery is very important as well. We want to make sure that we get at least a cup per minute of flow rate out of our water, and we want to make sure that we have enough water available for about 3/4 of a gallon per day for each of the pigs. So that's kind of our target. That's what we want to maintain. We also want to make sure that the water is always clean and fresh as well. And as we bring nursery pigs in, we want to make sure that our lines are flushed and make sure that they don't have stale water in them. So when receiving pigs, we want to make sure that we flush our lines, run waters to make sure that we've got clean, fresh water right when they arrive in the barn. One other thing that we want to manage is our environment. Making sure that we have enough minimum airflow so that we can keep fresh air coming into the barn. Then we also want to manage temperature, which is a really critical part of bringing weaned pigs in. Weaned pigs, they cannot take, they really require a pretty hot environment. So we're looking at 85 to 89 degrees depending on the weight and the health of the pig. What we really want to see is two things. Number one, it needs to be comfortable for the person, even though it might be pretty hot at 86 degrees. But we want to make sure that the air quality is good and that we feel comfortable with the air that's in the barn. The other thing is that we want to take a look at the pigs. So here we can see the pigs that are spread out, laying next to each other. That is a good sign. It may be a tick cold. We've got a little bit of piling way in the corner. However, what we want to see is pigs laid out right next to each other. That's a sign that the pigs aren't too cold and aren't too hot. If they're spread out farther than that, then that means that we may have a too hot of environment. If they're piling up on each other too deep, that means that we have too cool of an environment. So we really want to measure ourselves, and we want to use ourselves as a measure, and we want to use the pigs as a measure when we're looking at the environment of starting pigs. Individual animal care is something that we want to do every single day. So when we bring weaned pigs in, they're under a lot of different stresses that they haven't been under before. They used to be on their mother, now they're in a pen with a bunch of their brothers, sisters, and pen mates. And we want to make sure that each one of them is cared for individually. If anyone is getting sick or doesn't look well, that they're pulled and managed in a pen on their own. If you can look around here, we've got a pretty good group of healthy pigs, but we did do a good job of, in this case, of doing an individual treatment. If I set this pig down, you can see that he is a little bit gant. He's still lively, looks like he has a fever. He's been treated under the advisement of a veterinarian on what to use. So he'll do fine, and we'll likely pull him into an individual pen so he can get a little bit more individual care and a little bit easier access to both feed and water. So the big thing is we want to reduce stress, treat the pigs that need to be treated, and make sure that we pull pigs that need to go into a separate pen in a lower stress environment. The other thing that you want to look for is hair coat, hair color. Sometimes when pigs aren't feeling well, their hair coat gets more coarse, and they don't do as good of a job of keeping themselves clean, so you can kind of see a dirty or a soiled hair coat as well. Those are things to take a look at when we're doing individual animal care. Individual treatment, it's a learned skill. It takes time to do it. It takes time to identify individual pigs out of a pen of 50, 100, or 200. But it's an extraordinarily critical point in raising healthy, profitable pork, that is the best product for our consumer. So daily chores and daily walkthroughs are the most important thing an animal care worker can do. We're addressing all of the 3 points, all the 4 points that we had talked about earlier. One would be feed, water, environment, and then individual animal health. So putting those all together, we're doing that on an individual pen, individual pig basis. So as I'm walking through, I want to make sure I take my time and individually identify any pigs that look abnormal or that look sick. What we can see here is we've got a gant pig, the blue pig right over there. We can see that he's a little bit redder in color, that he hasn't been eating and drinking as much as he should, and he probably has a fever. So this pig we've already identified and treated, and then we're going to be placing him into a fallback pen with less pigs in it and a lower stress environment, so he can recover through both medication and through a lower stress environment. The things that I'm looking for on the pig end when I'm walking through this barn is I'm looking for pigs that are breathing heavily. We call it thumping. Heavy breathing in and out of the rib cage. The other thing that I'm looking for is red butts or diarrhea scours. Usually that's associated with a thin pig as well. But we really want to cover 3 bases. Number 1 is respiratory, number 2 is enteric, which would be diarrhea, and number 3 would be we want to make sure that our pigs are full-bellied and eating well, eating and drinking well. So as we're walking through here, we've really identified one pig that needs to be pulled. We do a good job of that, put them in a low-stress environment, and then we can take care of them individually that way. So, and we want to also make sure that we take our time. This is a learned skill. Identifying sick animals is absolutely a learned skill, and we want to make sure that we give every pig the individual time that it deserves.